This video is not about how a calorie deficit didn't work for me. It did, it does, and it always will. I'm a health and wellness coach. I understand the principles of fat loss. It will always be about calories in versus calories out. But, and heavy on the but, Seco is just not enough. And I feel like the health and fitness community is really split into like two camps. Camp one is like, calories are king. I could lose weight eating McDonald's only. And then camp two is like, quality is everything. It's all about hormones and insulin management and metabolism. And then there's normal people like me who see the value and nuances in both camps and find themselves somewhere in the middle. I struggled with weight loss for 2 years and my body just wasn't responding to a traditional calorie deficit. I worked with different coaches. I studied a lot. I have a degree in physiology, for Christ's sake, and yet nothing was working despite doing everything by the book. I'm talking training hard 4 days a week, but making sure you're resting as well. 8 to 9 hours of sleep, 12 to 15K steps, 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, carbs in and around my training, 0.8 to 1 gram of fat per kilo of body weight, a 15 to 20% cut to my calories, too much and it might be too aggressive. Reverse dieting before and after the cut to make sure that my metabolism is set. I had it down to a literal science. And yet I couldn't lose more than 1 kilo after 6 weeks of doing all that. I looked like this entering the deficit, and then my period came around and I looked like this. That is not normal. It was insane to me because I had done countless bulks and cuts over the years. I've successfully lost 15 kilos in a short period of time in a healthy way and managed to keep it off. I had no issues with dieting before, and then all of a sudden I'm resistant to weight loss. And I've worked with dozens and dozens of women who come to me saying the same thing. I'm super adherent. I stick to the process. I dot every I, I cross every T. I'm patient, but something just ain't right. And this video is for you, my girl. I am not about gaslighting you, telling you that you just haven't stuck it out long enough. Are you sure that you're really being adherent? Are you secretly sneaking calories that you're not reporting or realizing? I believe you. And more than anything, I believe that you know your body better than any coach or expert ever could. So when you say something ain't right, it ain't right. So let me share my story. First up, we're going to talk about what led my body to stop responding to a calorie deficit. Secondly, how I fixed it. And thirdly, my 2 super weapons to making a calorie deficit work and make it easier to stick to. Now, I'm not going to say that these are 2 secret methods to help you lose 10 kilos in 10 days. I don't believe in that clickbait nonsense. But these 2 variables are super underrated, not spoken about enough, and every woman needs to know. So without further ado, let's get into it. Why my body stopped responding. For context, I was a fat girl who became a skinny girl and managed to maintain that. And then I just got really obsessed with the gym because I hated how I looked. Then I did my first bulk and I realized, damn, like I've got something on me. I look all right. And then I started cutting and bulking nonstop on top of working full time and studying full time and not eating the best. Like, yes, I was hitting my macros, but it consisted of a lot of pro-inflammatory foods and protein powders and lean cuts of meat and just a poor quality choice of ingredients. I did not have a good nutritional literacy beyond the basics of macros, and I thought if I hit them, that was all I needed, without realizing that, hey, the fat that you're getting from your sources and from chicken thigh and a protein bar is not the same as a wild caught piece of salmon or a full fat cut of meat or egg yolk, something I used to always skip out on because it was unnecessary fat. So on top of the fact that I was living in a chronic state of stress and I was overtraining, I was always in a chronic state of overeating on a lot of pro-inflammatory foods or undereating on poor nutrient foods. Yes, they were whole foods, but it just wasn't what I needed to support the kind of lifestyle that I had. And so when something comes along like a global pandemic, you become more susceptible to getting sick when you're already in a really bad shape. My nervous system was cooked. My gut health, my hormones, they all went in the gutter. And honestly, getting COVID was a big wake-up call. It wiped me out completely. The flu itself wasn't bad. It was the recovery. I had long COVID and I dealt with those symptoms for a year. And the wake-up call was I was a gym girl who was sick. I thought I was healthy, but I had so many underlying issues that I was ignoring, sweeping under the rug just because I hit my protein and I go to the gym 5 days a week. On top of that, I caught a secondary virus. This was actually a few months before I got COVID. There was another pandemic doing the rounds, something called meningitis, which, if you don't know, attacks the nervous system. So I was dealing with a whole bunch of neurological symptoms like memory issues, vertigo, and inability to concentrate, light sensitivity, a chronic migraine, and I literally spent like 2 months in bed recovering from that. And the long-term symptoms are pretty dire. I mean, a lot of people end up with blindness, permanent balance issues, and loss of memory. So thank the Lord I didn't have to go through that. But I have to admit, ever since getting long COVID and meningitis, I just haven't been the same. And that's kind of what kicked off my holistic healing journey. But it's just something I have to be on top of, because the moment I drop the ball with my health, all of those symptoms start coming back. So coming back from the huge hit to my health, one would expect that any normal person would take things slow and get back into things gradually. But then there was me, a typical Enneagram type 3, who was like, yeah, I don't know, I don't got no time for that. Let's go 0 to 100 real quick. We got things to catch up on. I just spent the last 3 months in bed gaining weight, not doing much. So I have some fluff to lose. I have some muscle to gain. I have a business I gotta run. I got things to do. I don't have time for recovery. I went sicko mode. And so the best analogy that I can give for this scenario is I'm trying to save the furniture while the house is burning. And I spent a good 18 months dealing with a whole battalion of symptoms. I'm talking leaky gut, cystic acne, chronic fatigue, the worst PMS and PMDD of my life, like every month. Difficulty concentrating and brain fog, chronic inflammation, crippling anxiety every time I woke up, and I was gaining weight rapidly. My body was becoming so unpredictable and it was not responding to anything I was doing. I thought a quick little reverse diet, maybe a quick deload from the gym, which is where you just pull back on the intensity and the volume, would fix the problem. But I didn't realize until a year later, I had just spent that year yo-yo dieting, something that I as a coach worked on with my clients. I didn't realize that that was happening to me. And I literally did not realize how bad it got until I hit rock bottom, which was basically doing legs on Monday and then spending Tuesday and Wednesday in bed because I literally couldn't do anything else. It was having full-blown panic attacks and unable to socialize or show up to work. I'm not going to go into too much more detail beyond that, but I did make an in-depth video about my healing journey from long COVID, meningitis, chronic stress, nervous system, all of that stuff. So I'll link it in the description box below. But to give you a quick snapshot of 2 years of hard work to reverse all of that damage, I split my healing journey into 3 phases. This is how I fixed my body. Phase 1 was to get healthy, and that took about 18 months. Phase 2 was what I called earn the deficit, and that took 4 months. And phase 3, which is the phase I'm in now, is to deficit smarter, not harder. So let's break them down. Phase 1, get healthy. This was the longest, and I completely stepped back from life. I stopped training for a few months, and when I did get back into it, I was training at low intensities, probably twice a week at best, sometimes 3. I slept, oh boy did I sleep. I slept like 10 plus hours a night, which was insane. And I became a hardcore carnivore. Yo, the carnivore diet did so much for me. And I know it's not sustainable, and I know that it doesn't work for everyone, because hey, like if we just think about the way our ancestors ate, what works for me, a Mediterranean, will be different to the most healing diet for someone who came from the Caribbean, you know, but it was incredible for me. The only thing that didn't really work well was just the no carbs. I mean, no one said it better than Mr. I'm Just Ken himself, right?
You need carbs. Your brain runs on glucose. For simple cognitive functions, you need them.
So I did like straight carnivore for 6 weeks. My energy levels were trash, and then I incorporated rice, potato, honey, fruit, and then it was just chef's kiss. I'm not gonna get into too much detail about exactly the science behind it, but red meat is a superfood. Eggs, a superfood. We get pretty much everything that we need from animal products, besides things like magnesium, vitamin D. So my diet is mostly red meat, a little bit of chicken, dairy, wild caught fish, eggs, fruit, honey, rice, potato, sourdough, rye bread, and I have my dark chocolate every day. I still eat veggies and nuts and granola. There's no food off limits for me, but the bulk of my diet is very carnivorous. And ever since I switched to this Paleolithic animal-based template of eating, the sheer difference in the quality of my energy levels, my skin, my hair growth, my nail growth, my digestion, my stamina, my mental clarity, literally every area of my life has quadrupled since even before I got sick. So I cleared a lot of the inflammation, and then I actually ended up doing a calorie surplus for about 12 months. And it was because there was just so much metabolic damage, and healing is a very energy expensive process. So I ended up gaining about 6 or 7 kilos across that 12-month span. And that was a process in and of itself, you know, just accepting weight gain and the body dysmorphia, coming from looking like the best version of myself to pretty much the worst. It was tough, but so necessary, and I did it in a healthy way. And I think the biggest lesson here is if you know you have metabolic damage, you have to commit to a long-term metabolic building phase. A short 2-month reverse diet is just not going to be enough. And so if you're struggling with a calorie deficit, I don't think it's the calorie deficit's fault. I think it's your fault. It's your fault that your health is so shit, because that is the only reason why it wouldn't work, is that your body is literally in survival mode. If your nervous system is just so dysregulated, if you're in an unhealthy home or relationship, if your periods are showing up every month taking you through hell, you maybe don't have a period, you have skin problems, your hair's falling out, indigestion and other gut issues, brain fog, mental health problems. Do you know how many mental health problems are linked to the fact that you're just inflamed? Maybe it's not a chemical imbalance. Like I said earlier, you're focused on saving the furniture when the whole house is burning. How about we put out the fire first? Phase 2 is the earn your deficit phase. I started this phase in like Feb or March of this year, and the reason I called it the earn your deficit phase is because you really need to prove to yourself that you're capable of doing all the things required to actually lose fat. And I can't lie, it was hard going back to things that I used to do on autopilot when I had just spent 18 months living the softest life ever, where I literally didn't have to exercise any discipline whatsoever. I struggled to hit 10K steps a day. I struggled to drop calories gradually after never having to say no to food. I struggled to train 3 days a week and to show up regardless of how I was feeling, and to wake up before 8 a.m. when I used to be a religious 5 a.m.er. It literally took me 4 months to build back to that point. I did it very slowly and gradually over time because I was so terrified of losing all of the healing that I had worked on, especially considering I had a history of going 0 to 100 real quick, and I didn't want to repeat old cycles. I also really wanted to prove to myself that I was actually capable of doing this, because I had a lack of what I call diet confidence or deficit confidence. I had failed like 4 or 5 deficits up until this point. And so I actually didn't think that my body would respond well, and I had this lack of trust with it. I didn't think that it would actually work this time because of my track record. So a part of this earn your deficit phase was also teaching me how to build trust with my body again, to prove to myself that my body was reliable, that it would respond in a predictable way, and that the calorie deficit would work. And lastly, phase 3, which is to deficit smarter, not harder. So I've lost about 5 kilos since the beginning of this deficit, and it's taken me about 4 months to do that. A lot of people would consider that to be slow weight loss, and I would tend to agree. But it is the most I've managed to lose in a long time whilst feeling as good as I do. Because I don't know about you, but deficit fatigue be real. And I'm 4 months in and I feel fine. Like, yeah, it's hard, don't get me wrong. I get hungry, I get fatigued. My body's definitely in a state of stress, but I can push. I still get good menstrual cycles. My training is actually doing numbers, like I'm still hitting PBs, even though I'm depleted. And I just know I can keep this up. I'm halfway to my goal, and even if I have to take a little break before getting back into the deficit, I'm responding, and that is just music to my ears. So Mary from 2 years ago, bitch, we made it. But what's interesting is when I first started the deficit, or like the first 6 weeks, I felt like trash, and here's why. I kept my carbs as high as possible to support my training, which is the traditional bodybuilding advice according to the current research, right? So my fats were really low. I'm talking like 40 grams per day. And that meant that I had to eat egg whites and chicken breast and the sirloin steak instead of the the Scotch steak, you know? And when I tell you, it kicked in so damn quick. My period that month was trash. I was going through it. I felt so foggy, so depleted. And I was like, it shouldn't feel this hard. It's only the first 6 weeks. And I was like, not today, Satan. We've been through this. And I just knew I had to go back to the drawing board and reassess. And I just said to myself, okay, when I was living my most healthiest lifestyle, what was I doing and how can I implement that into a deficit? And the biggest two standouts were a lack of quality animal fats and my cortisol was not doing well. And so that leads me to 2 variables that are severely overlooked and I think are actually the keys to women who struggle with weight loss actually succeeding with their goals. So let's talk about the first variable, fats. I switched to a higher fat template. So I started off my deficit eating like this, which is probably what you see on a what I eat in a day in a calorie deficit on social media. And then I switched over to eating like this. I'm still able to lose fat. Yes, my carbs are lower than I'd like, but for the sake of my health, it is worth it. Here is my exact meal plan if you want some inspo. For breakfast, we start off with premium beef mince. Yes, that's the full fat version. And then I'll have that with cooked rice. And then once or twice a week, I'll have a couple of eggs. For my snack, it's a protein yogurt bowl with granola and kiwi. And this is usually my pre-workout, so I'm really smart with my carb timing. Sometimes I'll have coconut water for electrolytes while I train and a couple of medjool dates, which in my humble opinion is the goated pre-workout snack. Who needs Gatorade when you got that combo? For lunch, I'll have a chicken wrap with some Kewpie mayo, pickle, and lettuce. This is usually the smallest meal of the day, and it's just to get my protein in, really. Then dinner is Scotch steak with potatoes. These are usually spud lights, so I can have more volume, and about 15 grams of butter. I'll also have wild-caught salmon once every 1 to 2 weeks, so I can get my omega-3s in as well. And then, of course, the non-negotiable sweet treat at the end of the night, we have 3 blocks of Lindt sea salt dark chocolate. That is the best chocolate in the world. You cannot convince me otherwise. And that's a total of 1710 calories, 143 protein, 144 carbs, and 61 fat. So as you can see, my fats are higher and my carbs are lower than what is considered to be optimal in bodybuilding, and I'm okay with that. My training does lack that explosiveness that I would otherwise have if my carbs were higher, and I do struggle with lifting. And that's expected when you're in a deficit and you're depleted and your carbs are quite low. But despite this, because I feel so nourished and my psychological state is just so calm and my hormones are supported and my nervous system is really, really balanced and regulated, I actually find that I have the mental stamina to push. Like, yeah, it is a grind, but somehow I'm still doing numbers in the gym and I'm progressing or at least maintaining, which is the best a lot of people can expect in a deficit. Moving on to the conversation around cortisol. This is going to be a really controversial opinion, but I actually think that a day spent in bed, rotting, having a refeed day where you eat an extra 300 calories, where you get half your steps in, or maybe you do some light stretching or light movement, can actually be better for your fat loss than going and doing all the things that you're expected to do for fat loss. And hear me out. Let me break it down for you. When you spend so many days in a row with elevated cortisol levels, with cumulative fatigue, you're gonna hold on to more weight and your body gets into what's called conservation mode, where it's like, yo, we're in survival mode right now. Our cortisol has been really high for a while, so let's just conserve as much energy as possible. I'm going to literally hold on to as many calories to save it for a rainy day because I'm getting all these signals that we're in a stress state. But let's say you have the bed rot day every week, the refeed day every week, even though you may think that it's just prolonging your results. You're bringing your cortisol levels down. You're telling your body, hey, there's no need to be pressed about it. Like, yeah, you're in a depleted state. Yeah, things are hard, but we're still resting. We can still have access to food, okay? You're gonna get a little bit of a break. And so what ends up happening? Have you noticed that after a really, really stressful day where you've hit your steps, you've hit your macros, you've hit your training, and you've done a really good job, and your weight's like spiked, and then the next day you have a rest day, a refeed day, a sleep in, and you look at the weight on the scales and it's gone down? I wonder if cortisol has anything to do with that. It's counterintuitive, I get it. It may not be what traditional bodybuilding advice goes by, what the science tells us yet, because the science is always catching up. But more is actually not more. And I can speak from experience and from the experience of all the clients I've worked with. Sometimes you need to actually chill, because success in a calorie deficit is about managing stress. And the more stressed you are, the more alert your body's gonna be. I'm not gonna say that starvation mode is a thing, because it's not, but conservation mode is. And if we can manage that variable, you will find a lot more ease with dropping the weight, and it'll actually be easier to stick to the calorie deficit. You know, people talk about rest days and it's like just not training, or they call it an active recovery day. Can we just treat them as they're called? A true rest day where you sleep in, you have an Epsom salt bath, you bum around, you go have a meal out, or cook a higher calorie meal at home. Can we just do what we say we're doing? And I bet my bottom dollar, if you try that, you'll wake up tomorrow morning looking visibly leaner, less inflamed, and the scales will probably say the same thing too. So if you've been struggling with your calorie deficits and you just know something ain't right, there's probably some health issues that you need to fix. And or the way that you're approaching your calorie deficits are just too aggressive, not respecting the fact that your body's quite literally rejecting it. Spend time healing. And by time, I mean a minimum of 6 months. And let me just put it this way. I could have healed in 6 months when I first had all my issues with meningitis and COVID, but I put it off. And then I ended up wasting, well, maybe not wasting, but losing 18 months because I had a myriad of additional problems to solve. So I know you don't want to waste time, you don't want to put life on hold right now, but don't think that it's not going to come back to bite you in the ass later. So just a little bit of tough love, a little bit of a message that you may have needed to hear, my girl, because I've been through it and I don't want you to. And when it's time to do your calorie deficit, focus on nutrition and fat. The nutrition you're going to get from overnight oats and chicken breast is just not the same as eggs and red meat, okay? Fat is where you're going to get the literal build-up, the makeup of what makes your cells, what makes your hormones. If you want to get the vitamins, the collagen, the minerals, you need to be eating the fat that's attached to the animal. You get what I'm saying? Women need more fats than men. That's just a fact, whether you're in a calorie deficit or not. Women don't tolerate stress as well as men, whether you like it or not. We are so much more susceptible and sensitive to cortisol. And so I think that the space of female fat loss is severely underdeveloped because we're not considering the sex differences. And I actually do think that the science needs to catch up, considering that most studies done in the health, fitness, and bodybuilding space is done on men and female athletes. I think it really has a long way to go. And if anecdotal evidence is all we have, then take me as your science, baby. Treat food as a tool. Treat the feedback that you get from your body as a tool, okay, to gauge. I think that as a whole, as a society, as women in Western countries, we don't know how to read our bodies. And once you learn the language of what your body is telling you, you will get a lot further, okay? When you become more intuitive, yes, it's good to be informed. Yes, it's good to have the knowledge. But I think that when we marry it with that intuition, with that, hey, let me go into my body to get some feedback, you will go so much further. You will get results without the burnout, without the yo-yoing, without the side effects that come with it. And if you want to get some insight into which areas of your holistic health need work, then you should take the Glow Score quiz. It covers 5 areas of your life. And when you get your results, you'll also get a personalized email from me breaking down all of the areas with actionable insights and suggestions on how you can improve them. The link is in the description box down below. And if you want to work with me, you can actually book me in for a free discovery call where we can chat about your issues. You can do a one-off consultation with me where we connect the dots and you can get immediate answers, or you can work with me one-on-one with the ongoing coaching membership. I hope that this video has been a breath of fresh air for whoever is just sick of hearing the same recycled generic fat loss advice that's just not working for them. I hear you, girl, and your body is going to be your #1 source of information. Start tapping in and taking care of your body, and it will take care of you back. Ciao.